The first blow from her father's hand sent a shock through Hazel Armstrong's body that resonated all the way to her soul. It wasn't the physical pain that hurt the most, it was the betrayal behind it. The rage in his eyes when she had dared to speak her mind about the ranch's future at the dinner table. Colorado Territory, 1875. The setting sun cast long shadows across the plains as Hazel ran through the tall grass, her breath coming in sharp, painful gasps. The taste of copper lingered in her mouth from where her lip had split. At 22, she had endured her father's temper for years since her mother's passing, but tonight was different. Tonight, she knew she wouldn't go back. "You ungrateful little wretch." His words still echoed in her ears as she pushed forward, her legs burning with exertion. "No daughter of mine will tell me how to run my business." The memory of his belt coming off made her run faster, even as darkness fell across the land. Hazel had no destination in mind. She only knew she needed to put distance between herself and the Armstrong ranch. Her father's drinking had grown worse over the years, but his violence had escalated to something unrecognizable tonight when she suggested selling some cattle before winter to avoid financial ruin. The night air grew cold as stars appeared overhead. Hazel's pace slowed as exhaustion overtook her. She had nothing but the clothes on her back, a simple blue cotton dress, now torn at the hem from her frantic escape, and boots that weren't meant for running miles across open country. When she stumbled and fell for the third time, Hazel didn't immediately rise. Her body trembled from fatigue and hunger. Tears mixed with the dirt on her face as reality settled in. She was alone in the wilderness with no supplies, no money, and nowhere to go. A distant sound made her freeze. Hoofbeats. Someone was coming. Panic seized her. Had her father sobered up enough to come after her? Hazel scrambled to her feet, looking frantically for somewhere to hide, but the open prairie offered little sanctuary. She crouched low in the grass, praying the approaching rider would pass by without noticing her. The hoofbeats slowed. Hazel held her breath. "Hello." A man's voice called out. It wasn't her father's gruff tone, but something gentler. "Is someone out there?" Hazel remained silent, torn between hope and fear. "I saw you fall," the voice continued. "Are you hurt?" "I mean no harm." After a moment's hesitation, Hazel slowly rose from her hiding place. In the moonlight, she could make out the silhouette of a man atop a horse. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and had a rifle secured to his saddle, but it remained untouched. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked, dismounting with careful movements. As he approached, Hazel could see he was young, perhaps in his mid-20s, with broad shoulders and a concerned expression. His features became clearer as he drew nearer, kind eyes that crinkled at the corners and a strong jawline softened by genuine worry. "I'm fine," Hazel said automatically, then winced as her split lip reminded her of the lie. The stranger noticed her injury immediately. "You're hurt." It wasn't a question. He stopped a respectful distance away, seemingly understanding her wariness. "I'm Jake Keller. I've got a small ranch about 3 miles east of here. Can I help you somehow?" Hazel hesitated. She'd never been alone with a man who wasn't family, and the stories of dangers women faced on the frontier ran through her mind. But there was something in Jake's eyes that didn't speak of threat. "I'm Hazel," she said finally, omitting her surname. I'm just passing through." Jake glanced at her torn dress and the absence of any belongings. "Passing through to where, if you don't mind my asking?" "There's not much out this way for miles." The tears Hazel had been fighting threatened to spill over. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded slowly, as if her answer told him everything he needed to know. "Well, Miss Hazel, night's getting cold, and these parts aren't safe after dark. Coyotes, snakes, and worse. My sister Emma lives with me at the ranch. You're welcome to a hot meal and a place to sleep for the night." No questions asked. The mention of his sister eased some of Hazel's fear. Still, she hesitated. "I give you my word as a gentleman," Jake added softly. "You'll be safe. And tomorrow, if you want to keep moving on, I won't stop you." Exhaustion made the decision for her. Hazel nodded, swaying slightly on her feet. Jake approached slowly, leading his horse. "Can you ride? You can take Penny here, and I'll walk alongside." "I can ride," Hazel said. She'd been on horses since before she could walk. With gentle hands, Jake helped her mount, careful not to touch her more than necessary. True to his word, He didn't ask about her injuries as they made their way toward his ranch, walking beside the horse in comfortable silence. The Keller ranch was modest compared to her father's sprawling property, but even in the darkness, Hazel could see it was well maintained. A small house with a front porch sat nestled against a backdrop of cottonwood trees. A barn and corral stood nearby, housing what looked like a small herd of cattle and several horses. A lantern's glow appeared at the door as they approached, and a young woman stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "Jake? That you?" she called out cautiously. "It's me, Emma," he responded. "I've brought a guest." Emma lowered her rifle as they drew closer, her eyes widening at the sight of Hazel. "Oh my stars," she breathed, taking in Hazel's disheveled appearance and visible injuries. Without another word, she rushed forward to help Hazel dismount. "Let's get you inside," Emma said, her arm gently supporting Hazel's waist. "I'll heat some water for a bath, and we can see to those cuts." The interior of the Keller home was warm and inviting. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the smell of stew lingered in the air. Simple furniture filled the main room, a wooden table with 4 chairs, a small sofa, and a rocking chair near the fireplace. Doorways led to what Hazel presumed were bedrooms. "You must be starving," Emma said, guiding Hazel to a chair. "Let me fix you a plate while Jake tends to his horse." Before Hazel could protest, Emma was ladling thick stew into a bowl and cutting a generous slice of bread. The aroma made Hazel's stomach growl audibly, reminding her she hadn't eaten since morning. "Thank you," Hazel murmured, accepting the food gratefully. "You're both very kind to take in a stranger." Emma smiled warmly. "Anyone Jake finds wandering the prairie at night is welcome here." She paused, studying Hazel's face. "Those bruises. They're not from a fall, are they?" Hazel's spoon halted halfway to her mouth. She lowered it slowly, unable to meet Emma's gaze. "You don't have to tell me," Emma said quickly. "Like Jake said, no questions asked. But if someone hurt you and is looking for you, we should know. For your safety as much as ours." The door opened as Jake entered, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. His gaze immediately went to Hazel, concern evident in his expression. Hazel felt something break inside her. The kindness of these strangers after years of her father's increasing cruelty was too much. Tears spilled onto her cheeks as the words tumbled out. "My father," she said, her voice cracking. He didn't like what I had to say about selling some cattle before winter. Said no daughter would tell him how to run his business." She touched her split lip gingerly. "This isn't the first time, but it's the worst. I couldn't stay anymore." Jake's jaw tightened, and Emma's hand went to her mouth. Brother and sister exchanged a look that Hazel couldn't quite interpret. "You're safe here," Jake said firmly. "No one has the right to hurt you like that, kin or not." "Jake knows something about that," Emma said softly, her eyes on her brother. "Our pile wasn't much different." Jake shook his head slightly, as if dismissing an unpleasant memory. "That's why we started fresh out here, just the two of us. Built this place from nothing. We understand running away," Emma added. "And we understand needing a safe place to land." Hazel felt the weight of their words. They weren't just offering shelter for a night. They were recognizing a shared experience. The realization brought a fresh wave of tears. "I don't want to burden you," she managed to say. Jake pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "You're not a burden, Hazel. You're welcome to stay as long as you need to figure things out." "Do you think he'll come looking for you?" Emma asked gently. Hazel considered this. "Maybe, when he sobers up and realizes I'm really gone. The Armstrong ranch is his pride. He wouldn't want word getting out that his daughter fled." "Armstrong?" Jake's eyebrows rose. "You're Thomas Armstrong's daughter?" Hazel nodded, suddenly afraid. Her father was known throughout the county, not just for his successful ranch, but for his temper. "I've had dealings with him at cattle auctions," Jake said grimly. "Never much cared for the man." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "If he comes around, you don't have to see him if you don't want to. This is your choice." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside Hazel. All her life, she'd had precious few choices. Her father had controlled everything: what she wore, who she spoke to, how she spent her time. The prospect of making her own decisions was as terrifying as it was liberating. "Thank you," she whispered. After she finished eating, Emma showed her to a small bedroom. "It's not much," Emma apologized, "but the bed is clean and comfortable." "It's perfect," Hazel assured her, overwhelmed by the kindness. Emma provided a nightgown and helped Hazel clean her cuts and bruises. As she worked, Emma chatted lightly about the ranch, their small herd of cattle, and the 2 horses Jake was training for a neighbor. "Jake's good with horses," Emma said as she gently applied salve to Hazel's split lip. "People say he has a way of calming the wildest stallions. I think it's because he understands what it means to be afraid." Hazel's eyes met Emma's. "Your father?" Emma nodded. "He drank too, like yours. Mother died when I was just a baby. Jake took the worst of it, always putting himself between Pa and me." She carefully tucked a strand of Hazel's hair behind her ear. "We left when I was 16 and Jake was 20. Started over. It wasn't easy, but we made it." The story gave Hazel hope. If they could build a new life, perhaps she could too. "Get some rest," Emma said, rising from the bed. "Everything looks different in the morning light." Sleep came quickly to Hazel that night, deeper and more peaceful than she had known in years. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the small window, and the smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. She dressed in her own clothes, which Emma had washed and mended overnight, and ventured into the main room. Jake was at the stove, frying eggs, while Emma set the table. "Good morning." Jake greeted her with a warm smile. "Hope you're hungry." Breakfast was a cheerful affair, with Emma recounting stories of their early days on the ranch, and Jake occasionally interjecting with corrections or additional details. Hazel found herself laughing for the first time in what felt like forever. "I should earn my keep," Hazel said as they cleared the dishes. "I know my way around a ranch. I can help with chores." "If you're feeling up to it," Jake agreed. "But there's no rush. You're our guest." Despite his protests, Hazel insisted on helping. She spent the morning working alongside Emma, feeding chickens, gathering eggs, and helping to prepare a stew for the midday meal. The work was familiar and comforting, reminding her of happier times before her mother's death. After lunch, Jake invited her to join him as he checked on the cattle. They rode side by side across the rolling hills of the Keller property, which, while smaller than her father's land, was beautiful in its own right. "How did you and Emma manage to buy this place?" Hazel asked as they paused atop a ridge overlooking a creek where some cattle were drinking. Jake removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "Didn't buy it exactly. Homesteaded it. Took a claim on unclaimed land. Built the cabin, worked the soil, raised cattle. Government grants the deed after 5 years if you improve the property. We just got our final papers 6 months ago." "That's impressive," Hazel said sincerely. "Building something from nothing." Jake's eyes met hers. Sometimes starting with nothing is better than starting with something poisoned. His words resonated deeply with Hazel. Her father's ranch, for all its prosperity, had become a place of fear and pain. As days turned into a week, Hazel found herself settling into life at the Keller Ranch. She worked hard alongside Jake and Emma, insisting on contributing to the household. Her bruises began to fade, and with them, some of the fear that had driven her flight. Each evening after supper, they would sit on the porch if the weather was fair, or by the fire if it was cool, talking long into the night. Jake spoke of his dreams for the ranch, expanding the herd, breeding stronger cattle, perhaps adding horses. Emma shared her hope of one day teaching at the small school in the nearby town of Cedar Creek. Hazel found herself opening up as well, speaking of her mother's gentle nature, her own love of books, and her hidden talent for sketching, which her father had dismissed as a waste of time. On the 8th day, as Hazel was hanging laundry with Emma, she spotted a rider approaching in the distance. Her heart froze as she recognized the broad-shouldered silhouette of her father. "Emma," she said, her voice tight with fear. "It's him." Emma followed her gaze, then squeezed Hazel's hand. "Go inside. I'll get Jake from the barn." Hazel hurried into the house, her hands trembling as she closed the door behind her. Through the window, she watched Jake emerge from the barn and walk toward the approaching rider, his stance casual but alert. Thomas Armstrong reined his horse to a stop, looking down at Jake with an expression Hazel knew all too well, contempt barely concealed beneath a veneer of civility. "Keller," her father greeted, not bothering to dismount. "I'm looking for my daughter. Trail leads this way." Jake pushed his hat back slightly. "Good afternoon, Armstrong. What makes you think your daughter would be here?" "Don't play games with me, boy," Thomas growled. "I know she's here. One of my hands saw her riding with you yesterday." Jake didn't deny it. And if she is, she's my daughter. She belongs at home. Seems to me, Jake said evenly, that home is where a person feels safe, not where they get beaten for speaking their mind. Thomas's face darkened with anger. What happens in my house is my business. You do well to remember that. And what happens on my land is mine. Jake countered, his voice still calm, but with an edge of steel. Hazel is welcome here for as long as she wants to stay. She's coming home with me, Thomas declared, starting to dismount. Jake's hand moved to his side, where his revolver was holstered. He didn't draw, but the gesture was clear. I'd advise against that, Armstrong. Hazel is a grown woman. She makes her own choices now. Thomas paused, one foot still in the stirrup. His gaze shifted between Jake and Emma, who now stood nearby with a rifle held casually but ready. After a tense moment, he settled back in his saddle. This isn't over, he warned. That girl has responsibilities to the Armstrong name. Her only responsibility is to herself, Jake replied. And I suggest you remember that the next time you think about raising a hand to her. With a final glare, Thomas wheeled his horse around and rode away, dust rising in his wake. Hazel's legs gave way, and she sank into a chair, her heart pounding. When Jake and Emma entered the house moments later, she looked up with tear-filled eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Jake knelt before her, taking her hands in his. He won't hurt you again, Hazel. Not while I'm breathing. The conviction in his voice made her breath catch. She saw something in his eyes, then something beyond kindness or duty. Something that made her heart beat faster for an entirely different reason. I should go, she said reluctantly. He'll keep coming back. He might bring men next time. I don't want to put you and Emma in danger. Where would you go? Emma asked gently. Hazel had no answer. This is your home now, if you want it, Jake said, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of her hands. We'll face whatever comes together. The days that followed were tense, with all three of them watching the horizon for riders. Jake took to carrying his rifle when working the far pastures, and Emma showed Hazel how to shoot a revolver, just in case, she had said. But Thomas Armstrong didn't return. A week passed, then two. In that time, something shifted between Hazel and Jake. Their conversations grew longer, their glances lingered. When their hands brushed while working together, neither was quick to pull away. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Jake turned to Hazel. I need to go into town tomorrow for supplies, he said. Would you like to come along? Hazel hesitated. She hadn't left the safety of the ranch since her arrival. What if someone recognizes me? You're not hiding, Hazel, Jake said gently. You've done nothing wrong. Besides, he added with a small smile, I'd be proud to be seen with you. The trip to Cedar Creek the next day marked a turning point for Hazel. The small frontier town was bustling with activity wagons loaded with goods, cowboys fresh from the trail, families going about their business. At first, Hazel stayed close to Jake, nervous about being recognized. But as they moved from the general store to the feed merchant to the small bookshop, where Jake insisted on buying her a novel she had mentioned wanting to read, Hazel's confidence grew. A few people nodded in greeting, some even stopping to chat with Jake, who introduced her simply as Miss Hazel, who's staying with us for a while. No one questioned her presence, and if anyone recognized her as Thomas Armstrong's daughter, they didn't mention it. Their last stop was the small dressmaker's shop, where Jake suggested Hazel might want some new clothes. Emma's things fit well enough, he said, but you should have your own. Hazel protested the expense, but Jake was insistent. Consider it payment for all your help on the ranch, he said, though they both knew her work didn't justify such generosity. While the dressmaker took her measurements, Jake waited outside. When Hazel emerged after selecting fabrics for 2 new dresses, she found him in conversation with the local sheriff. Ah, here she is now, Jake said as Hazel approached cautiously. Sheriff Miller, this is Miss Hazel. The sheriff tipped his hat. Mississippi, pleasure to meet you. His eyes lingered on her face, where the last faint traces of bruising were still visible. Jake here was just telling me you've been helping out at his place. Yes, sir, Hazel replied, her heart racing. Was the sheriff here about her father? Good, good, Sheriff Miller nodded. Well, I won't keep you folks. Just wanted to let Jake know that Thomas Armstrong was through here earlier, heading toward Denver. Said something about business that might keep him away a spell. Relief washed over Hazel. Her father was gone, at least for now. Thank you for the information, Sheriff, Jake said, shaking the man's hand. As they rode home, Hazel felt lighter than she had in weeks. The weight of fear had lifted, if only temporarily. You knew the sheriff would be there, she said to Jake as the ranch came into view. You wanted him to see me. Jake nodded. I figured it wouldn't hurt to have the law know you're with us of your own free will, in case your father tries to claim otherwise. His thoughtfulness touched her deeply. Thank you, Jake, for everything. That night, unable to sleep, Hazel slipped outside to sit on the porch steps. The moon was full, casting silver light across the land. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Jake until he spoke. Couldn't sleep either, he asked, settling beside her on the step. Hazel shook her head. Too much on my mind. Want to talk about it? She turned to look at him, studying his face in the moonlight. Over the past weeks, she had come to know every line and plane of it, the crinkles at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the small scar on his chin from a childhood accident, the way his brow furrowed when he was concentrating. I'm afraid, she admitted. Of your father? Not just him. Of everything. Of making the wrong choices. Of not knowing what comes next. She took a deep breath. Of how I feel when I'm with you. Jake's expression softened. And how is that? Like I'm standing on the edge of something enormous. Something that could be wonderful or terrible, and I won't know which until I take the leap. Jake reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I know that feeling well. You do? Ever since the night I found you in the grass, he said, his voice low and earnest. Every day I've known you, Hazel Armstrong, I've been falling deeper into something I can't control. And I don't want to control it. Hazel's heart pounded in her chest. What are you saying, Jake? I'm saying I love you, he said simply. I'm saying that whether you stay a week more or a lifetime, my heart is yours. And I'm saying that if you'll have me, I want to build a life with you, a life where you never have to be afraid again. Tears welled in Hazel's eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow. I've never been allowed to choose anything important, she whispered. My father always decided everything for me. This is your choice, Jake assured her. Only yours. In that moment, with the vast sky above and the land stretching out around them, Hazel made her decision. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to Jake's, a gentle kiss that carried all the words she couldn't yet say. When they parted, Jake's smile was brighter than the stars overhead. Is that a yes? It's a beginning, Hazel replied, her own smile matching his. In the months that followed, life took on a rhythm that felt both new and wonderfully familiar to Hazel. She and Jake courted properly, with Emma serving as chaperone during their trips to town and their evenings on the porch. The 2 new dresses became 6 as Hazel used money she earned selling her sketches to the newspaper in Cedar Creek. Word reached them occasionally about Thomas Armstrong. He had indeed gone to Denver, but returned to his ranch after a month. According to town gossip, he had been asking about Hazel, but he never came to the Keller ranch again. Sheriff Miller paid a visit once to inform Hazel that if she wished to press charges against her father for the assault, he would support her. Hazel declined. The past is behind me, she told the sheriff. I'm looking forward now. On a crisp autumn day, with the cottonwood trees ablaze in gold and red, Jake and Hazel were married in the small church in Cedar Creek. Emma stood as Hazel's maid of honor, beaming with joy for her brother and the woman who had become like a sister. After the ceremony, as guests gathered at the Keller ranch for the celebration, Jake pulled Hazel aside. I have something to show you, he said, leading her toward the barn. Inside, he guided her to a small room at the back that Hazel had always assumed was for storage. When he opened the door, she gasped. The space had been transformed into a studio, with a large window for natural light, a sturdy table, and shelves stocked with drawing paper, pencils, and even paints. Jake, she breathed, taking in the room with wide eyes. Your talent shouldn't be hidden, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. This is your space, to create whatever your heart desires. Hazel turned in his embrace, her eyes shining with tears of joy. How did you manage this without me knowing? Jake grinned. Emma's good at keeping secrets. And you've been busy with wedding preparations. I love you, Jake Keller, Hazel said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. And I love you, Hazel Keller, he replied against her lips. Forever, just like I promised the night I found you. As they returned to their wedding celebration, Hazel's heart was full. The path that had brought her here had been painful, marked by fear and sorrow, but it had led to love and freedom. She had found not just safety in Jake's arms, but a true partnership, one where her voice was valued, her dreams encouraged, and her heart cherished. The sun was setting as the last guests departed, painting the sky in the same brilliant hues as the day Jake had first invited her to town. As they stood on the porch, watching Emma bid farewell to the final wagon, Jake squeezed Hazel's hand. "Happy?" he asked. Hazel looked up at the man who had found her at her lowest moment and helped her rise. The man who had promised forever and meant it with every fiber of his being. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. And as night fell over the ranch that was now truly her home, Hazel knew that the frightened woman who had run blindly into the darkness was gone. In her place stood a woman who had found her voice, her strength, and a love that would sustain her through whatever challenges life might bring. She had taken the leap into that enormous unknown and discovered that Jake had been right all along. They would face whatever came, together.